Let's get sweaty.
Hey guys, welcome to another Shenmue Dojo video. This video today, again, is going to have a focus on Shenmue 4. The question I'm asking everybody today, and what I want you guys to think about a little bit here, is could Shenmue 4 work as an episodic title? Now, there's a few reasons I wanted to sort of bring this up. Number one is episodic games have been quite successful over the years. When you think of Life is Strange, Tales from Borderlands, Walking Dead, Hitman, there's some success stories there that have engaged that sort of model, kept things going, and produced quality storytelling and games from within that. Fantastic. So that's one element of it. The next element of it is around sort of risk management, I guess. So I'm going to talk about why it can work and can't work in more detail in the video. But as we know, gaming, building worlds, especially open worlds, to modern standards is becoming vastly more expensive. When you think of games like Starfield, which is humongous, the amount of money that must have gone into something like that is astronomical. So one question I've sort of raising, I guess, is Shenmue 4, it can't compete, in my mind, from a financial standpoint in terms of budgetary responsibility or investment as a game like Starfield or these modern open world games. But one way in could be, and the sort of discussion in the community is, that Shenmue 4 could be episodic and essentially be done that way. So I'm thinking sort of breaking it down into 2 to 3 parts basically, and then if successful, in theory you could break down Shenmue 5 into the same way, and away you go. So let's explore this idea a little bit and how it could work, and then I'm going to talk about some of the risks that are involved with this thing as well. So why this could work? I mean, straight up off the bat, it's, in theory at least, less of an initial outlay of funding to get things moving. When you think of most games in the modern gaming environment, they are big, huge adventures around 30 to 40 hours. So the initial outlay on something like that is quite substantial. So by stripping it back to episodic and going 2 to 3 titles, that initial outlay on that first title is essentially a third of what your production could have been. So when you think of Shenmue 3, you've got a budget of 20 million all in, including marketing. If you could build, say, 10 hours worth of a game from that, so a third of the budget, so you're looking, what 5 to 6, 7 million potentially in that sort of bracket. Now, again, this is just sort of pie in the sky idea. Then the initial outlay is far less, therefore you have more room for profit and you risk manage better. Now, straight into that as well, you've got an engine there. Shenmue 3 engine is there, it's ready to go, just needs some tweaking. So a lot of the groundwork has already been done. So you're not having to have that initial outlay of getting the thing developed, getting the systems in place, and getting that moving. That's been done, so you can spend time refining it. And this then comes on to my next point around the development itself. Shenmue 3, like I say, I enjoyed it, but if it's accused of anything, it's trying to do too much. Story, characters, world, the lot. On what it had, it can be argued that essentially it was too big in scope. And while I applaud ambition, I can understand that argument. So doing a smaller game could in theory allow for more focus into the world, story, and the character development. Now you may ask me why, and it's very simple here. By having a 10-hour, 12-hour game, you have to have that richness of story content. If it's a 10-hour slog and it's episodic, you are done. If it's 10 to 12 hours of rich character, world building, all of that together, that is going to be an in. And Shenmue can do that, and we know it can do that from the previous iterations. So by having a smaller game, in my mind at least, it forces you to be more focused in on the things that matter. And what matters is story, content, and character development and world building within the Shenmue game, if you like. One thing I think Shenmue lends itself quite well to in this sort of episodic format is we know it jumps from location to location to location. Or you've got the chapter cards, which again are all set in different places. So in theory, as long as the writing's okay, you could have quite a natural ending for each chapter and game. So you could finish one part, say for example, at the end of the Cliff Temple, I'm just making this up. You could have one part in Luang, you could have one part in Singapore. I'm making this up, but you see the point. That you could naturally move from location to location, and there's your ending point to the story, and then you have the big opening where you arrive at a new location. And Shenmue does those sort of leaving and arriving events quite well in gaming, actually. Some of those shots are fantastic. Within that, and again, this is talked about a little bit as well with Shenmue 3, you reuse the assets that are built, and it allows for quicker pre-production on the next chapter and mainline development. It means economies of scale could kick in, so your return on investment gets better, and you can also adapt to feedback fairly swiftly for the next iteration. So if something's a little bit off in that first chapter, you can then fix it for the second chapter relatively quickly. One of, I think, probably the biggest factor in this is where I'm going to spend a bulk of time here is around sales and what it can do for sales. Now, in my view, and we discussed this in the podcast a little bit as well, is it could give Shenmue 4 a long tail in terms of the sales. So if you break Shenmue 4 into 4 or 3 chapters, say 3 chapters, 4's too many, 3 chapters, 3 10 to 12 hour chapters. So you've then got in total a 30 to 36 hour game. You could then sell that chapter for £25, which will exceed the cost of a AAA title at launch when you've done all 3. So you'd be paying £75 in theory for those 3 chapters, which is more than what you'd be getting for an initial outlay on a AAA title. So I'm going to use some sort of figures here from Shenmue Yakuza podcast that we did. Now, I must give some sort of warnings, if you like, around this, sort of caution. I've derived this from the sales figures that are out there and extrapolated some data to try and make some sort of sense. I've got a rough series average of sales across all mainline releases for Shenmue as a series of around 400 to 500,000, but I'm going to base this on the lower amounts just for the benefit of this all working out. So, imagine then you've got your game, it's ready, you're going to flog it out there for, say, 25 quid, right? 400,000 sales, so that's roughly the series average I've just talked about. It's 10 million. So if you've then developed that initial chapter off of a third of the Shenmue 3 budget, around 6.57 million, you're 3 million in profit already, which is amazing. That's fantastic if it all works, marketing, etc. doesn't take costs astronomically above it. But humour me here a little bit. If you go to £30, which I would suggest is very much the upper limit here on this, that's 12 million. So all of a sudden, you have not far off doubled your investment. And there's your profitability, in theory. I do note there's lots of other factors in this: cost of marketing, cost of distribution, all those things that I have no idea how they work. So I'm just doing this as a very basic presentation for you guys to sort of understand the point that I'm trying to make. Within that, you could also release it digitally only, so that you reduce production costs in terms of box stuff. And if you want to be really cheeky, and I'm all up for this, is that you then do a limited run release of a physical version. So essentially you could get people double dipping, you could get collectors going on that. Now I know some will see this as exploitative, and I understand that, but as Shenmue community, as Shenmue fans, you know damn well there's going to be a hardcore group that will buy those sorts of collectibles and then further invest in that profit margin essentially. So it could, as I say, give a really long tail to sales. If you factor in then merchandise and other bits and pieces, you could, again, get a better return of investment. As I say, it's all hypothetical, but you see the point I'm trying to make here. Away from that money, you can then sort of build excitement for each chapter. Now, as I've said in many videos, Shenmue 4, however it is released or revealed or whatever you want to do, it has to be polished and ready to go. You have to create excitement. So if you have that excitement for the first chapter and it's excellent, you have excitement for the second chapter and then the third. And then you've really got that buzz going, that continual buzz. People keep talking about it. You can market off of that. And that then might well engage other people. Obviously, it has to review well and be a good game, but that proof would be in the pudding, essentially. I will say that concessions may need to be made. Possibly one dub just to get things out quicker, maybe less NPCs potentially, or text-based NPCs, which I know is not necessarily popular in the Shenmue community, but it's something we may have to sort of realistically think about. And guys, if I've missed anything in that sort of why it could work, do give us a shout in the comments below. But I'm going to move on now a little bit to the risks of this. Now, I guess the first point could be a risk, whatever way you put it with Shenmue, is that we could end up in a cliffhanger type situation with a chapter selling poorly. That would apply to Shenmue 4 not ending the series, of course, that it doesn't sell well, and we'll then end up in this quandary again where we've got a cliffhanger and we could well be buggered. And as I said many times, Shenmue 4 has to absolutely smash it out the park to avoid that. So there is a lot of pressure here to do well from a gameplay point of view, review well, and also a sales point of view. Because if it doesn't, we've then got like a third of Shenmue 4, and then you may not ever finish it. And there have been examples of episodic games that haven't sold well, that have either had to make concessions or just get cancelled altogether. And we don't want that for Shenmue 4 in this format. As I've also sort of touched on, there could be accusations of over monetizing the fan base possibly, and we all know that certain elements of the media will jump on something like that. I personally don't have a problem with it. People are free to make their own choices. If they want to buy just a digital copy, that's what they do. If they want to collect everything, go ahead and do it. But having the options out there to monetize people as much as possible, to, to essentially improve the profit line and make this thing profitable, I'm all for it. There will be questions, I think, around why this isn't being done as a whole game. Now, they can easily answer that and mitigate that. They don't necessarily have to go into the real nitty-gritty detail publicly, but I'd like them to say, well, look, we're looking for affordable ways to make Shenmue. This for us is an affordable way that we can do this realistically and hopefully make some money. Now, that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be anything out of the ordinary. I know some people will jump on it and go, oh, here we go again. It's not finishing the series, etc., etc. And I understand that argument. But you have to balance that with how can we make this thing profitable from a business point of view. Shenmue as a whole probably hasn't been profitable, or if it has, it's only in recent years where it's probably broken even. Individual projects in Shenmue's history, so Shenmue 1 didn't turn a profit, Shenmue 2 definitely didn't turn a profit, Shenmue 3 probably did, but we don't know how much of one, and it's described as a core niche product. And then the anime was successful, but obviously we don't know how much money it made. So there's sort of checks and balances there, I guess, around it. So we need to sort of be there in terms of how that can be managed from a profitability standpoint, I guess. And then I suppose my next argument, and this is from a story perspective, is could it work because Shenmue is a slow burner? Yes, it lends itself well on going from location to location. But as we know, in Shenmue 1, 2 and 3, it all builds up to this story point at the end, big ending, and then you're off to the next location. But that's done within a sort of a 20 to 30 hour game. Would that feel potentially rushed or shoehorned in potentially in a shorter iteration? It's just something to factor in and how they may handle that, and you'll need good writing around that to essentially mitigate that and see how that would come out. So to summarize, I do think going episodic could work for Shenmue. I know I've made some very basic maths and assumptions around how it could be profitable, but I do think the basis of that model could well work. They would create worlds for each locations. They're not going to be massive in comparison to like modern games, and they could lend themselves, as I said, to a more focused approach. You can risk manage better. You can adapt things as progression goes through development, and in theory be quite flexible to how the demands of the community may or may not change. As I say with anything here, sales is the problem. It has to sell well. It has to make decent money to see a publisher or whoever wanting to come in on something like this. So it has to be able to sustain the push for the second and third episode, and then potentially you maybe even be looking at like episodes 4, 5 and 6 to do the Shenmue 5 elements to finish things off. 6 potential episodes, as an example, is a very big ask. And as I say, they have to review well to keep people interested, and they have to keep renewing and having new ideas and new ways to get people involved in this and get people buying it. Because if you keep rehashing stuff, eventually people may get bored, and that's something to consider. I know it's Shenmue and we won't get bored, but if you want to go wider than the community, you have to engage people in it through different methods as well. But anyway, guys, that's enough of me rambling talking about this. What do you guys think about going episodic for Shenmue 4 and future Shenmue titles? Is this something that you feel could work? Have I missed anything here in terms of the arguments for and against it? Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think, guys, and I'll pick a few out. And I always try and pick up and respond to a few where I can. As always, guys, thank you so much for dropping in on the content. We appreciate it so very much. And I'll be back with a video in the next probably week or so. But for now, guys, take care, have a good one, and all the best.